Marquis Ealy here for Status Coup. We're going to talk about Rashida Tlaib speaking with the FBI in a congressional hearing on terrorism. So there's a lot to discuss about this, but let's take a look first and then come back.
And white supremacist extremism cases would all fall under so-called domestic terrorism, correct?
Yes.
My understanding is that the remaining 80% of FBI's pending counterterrorism cases would be characterized as the international, what you called them I hate these labels, by the way, it drives me, as a Muslim, like I just hate them because it automatically makes me feel like people are targeting those of different faiths and colors and so forth. But call HVE cases.
So I think you're...
The 80% left from that budget, the resources are going to, no?
No. So we have approximately 4,500 to 5,000 terrorism cases.
Okay.
Of that, approximately 850 domestic terrorism cases. So if you take the rest, those are international terrorism cases.
Okay, so
we have approximately 1,000 homegrown violent extremist cases,
and so,
approximately 1,000
so the
ISIS
HVEs, those folks are falling under this
international terrorism.
Okay, so one of the things that came up is, and it's a good question to you, Mr. McCarty, or anybody else that'd like to answer. Do you think we should have a domestic terrorism statute?
I will say, as a former prosecutor, as a former investigator, I want every tool in the toolbox, and I want options. So if I can have more options,
McCarty,
I would say I want another tool in the toolbox.
Yes.
But I'll defer to the Department of Justice.
Of course.
To work with Congress if there's a statute.
So the tools we have is not enough? I mean, if somebody's threatening to kill people based on their faith, to kill people based on their beliefs, or just, that kind of sort of, I loved how you said any violence is a threat to society, right? Any form of violence, and I appreciate that. But there's not enough right now to give you all power. So I'm going to give you an example. So I've been in office for about 6 months. And when you get something like this, attention Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and ragheads Rashida Tlaib and Ilhan Omar, I was totally excited and pleased when I heard about 49 Muslims were killed in many... Many more were wounded in New Zealand. This is a great start. Let's hope and pray that it continues here in the good old USA. The only good Muslim is a dead one. How is that enough? Not enough to fall under domestic terrorism if they're targeting solely based on my faith and others and saying that a good Muslim is a dead one, obviously directed to me. By the way, they copied in this threat to my office. They copied the U.S. Department of Justice, the President, Department of Homeland Security, and so forth. And we get so many of them, and I keep asking, what happens? What happens to these individuals? Are they... I'm being sincere. I'm not trying to, I'm really sincere. I'm a mother, so I want to go home to my 2 boys.
Okay, so looking at this video, the first thing that comes to mind for me is that it is important that we have people in Congress that are diverse, that represent our communities, that understand and have lived experience with these issues. And this is exactly why. I'm sure there's a lot of white dudes that are going to be like, oh, well, she was emotional and she was blah, 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 blah. Like, no, dude, that's what's important. Humans have emotions. We need to deal with them. And the issues that we're talking about, the common denominator is usually humans. Even when we talk about climate change, the common denominator is humans. So humans always have emotions, so we should deal with that.
So first, my empathy. I'm in charge of domestic terrorism and international terrorism. I don't differentiate either when the threat comes in, nor does the FBI. We work on both the same.
And I appreciate that, and I hear that throughout your testimony. It's very consistent, Mr. McCarty, but how come we don't have enough tools right now to pull these people up in, because this is a format, and you can see there's a pattern.
Well, there's 2 parts to that. So I can tell you, the FBI, the Joint Terrorism Task Force, we are working hard, as was said earlier. We are working hard. If there's another statute that you think is needed, come talk to the Department of Justice. Absolutely. I mean, I think they've said that during the last testimony back in May. Those type charges, as you're explaining that, I want to arrest that person before they do something.
That's
I
right.
have to, right?
Right.
What am I going to do? I'm going to look at any charge I can do. Probably in that case, if it gets a little more specific with the violence and targeted violence, I'm going to use 18 U.S.C. 875, an interstate communication threat. That's what I'm going to do. So, and we do that every day, and we actually do it more. And I'm not trying to be argumentative here either. I'm just telling you, the men and women of the FBI are out here working this threat hard. And we arrest more of our subjects on domestic terrorism than we do international terrorism. And we're doing it as
We don't
much as
have
we
enough
can.
resources, I think, being spent on that. And you know, Mr. Shivers made
It's
a
not-
great
it's
point,
not an
because
apple and orange.
I am for, and I want to know I want my colleagues to know, I have my coffee hours, I have people protest. I absolutely welcome freedom of speech. I welcome anybody that has an opinion, even about my faith. But to get to the point where they pass it towards threatening life, and really, I mean, to me, that is enough. Sometimes you know, the protected speech, and that's something we have to be very careful and tread very carefully, very, very carefully with that. But it to that point where this person, where I feel like if it came from somebody of different, and no matter what, as we try to proceed, we say that's not true. But I feel like if they were Muslim or Black, they would be handled differently. Even the threat that we had in Florida, they released him on a tether. I had to go to Florida the same weekend. I couldn't believe they released him on a tether. And I've been on the other end, you know, defending many people that were wrongfully accused and wanting to, I couldn't get them on bail for the smallest incident of, you know, attempted assault and so forth, right? Serious offenses, I believe. But in many ways, these kinds of incidents, when it comes to threats of life towards other people based on, you know, somebody of Jewish faith, Muslim, being Black in America, this anti-Blackness movement that we have, when do we take those so seriously as a movement that is obviously pushing violence? I mean, I mean, at this point, you're letting the person out on a tether. I know you're not, Mr. McCarty. And like, what scares me about your, you know, kind of not requesting, but you're saying, do you think we should have domestic terrorism statute? What scares me about that is that we're expanding, and I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, that we're going to allow this big balloon of then we're still going to be leaving people out. I feel like if they're threatening the life of someone else, that alone should be just enough for us to get them on it. If it's based on hate because they're mentioning a faith, if it's based on color and so forth, like sexual orientation, that should be enough. And I mean, I commend you all in trying to keep our country safe, but I feel like almost like we need to be proceeding in a way that we're spending enough resources and money with the people that are here now, that are threatening lives of fellow Americans.
Thank
With
you.
that, I yield. I'm so sorry.
Thank you, Ms. Tlaib. I was so mesmerized by your statement, I lost track of time there. So that was my fault.
So yeah, like it's systems of oppression that are at play, and I'm going to prove it to you. Right here, I have the FBI's book. Remember, they were talking about HVEs. HVEs are homegrown violent extremists. And what I have here is the book on HVEs and the FBI. This is the FBI's training booklet for that. And it has a section on page 2 that says, why was this book created? Let's take a read. Why was this booklet created? The United States and other Western nations faced a heightened threat from homegrown violent extremists, heeding the call to violence from foreign terrorist organizations, including the Islamic State of Iraq and Sham, ISIS, Al-Qaeda, and other groups. In an effort to mitigate future attacks, well, hold on, is something missing? Yeah. White people are missing. Like, let's just keep it 1,000. Like, that's what it is. We're not talking about, like, there's Al-Qaeda and there's ISIS. What about y'all Qaeda? What's up with them? Where are Clive and Bundy and them? I'm in Las Vegas. Clive and Bundy and them, what, an hour, 20 minutes from me? Not even? 45 minutes or something? They right up the road from my house, bruh. Just up to 15. Where they at? Those are terrorists. They shot at FBI agents. And this is the FBI booklet. That's how committed to white supremacy the FBI is. Don't forget that the FBI is the same group of people that recorded Dr. King. They were on the hunt for what they called a, quote, black messiah. And now these same folks are prioritizing black identity extremists. Meanwhile, we have congressional representatives, congresspeople getting death threats. And she's sitting up there crying to this man. And she's doing her best to be fair to them when it's clear that the people that write the rules for the FBI have no intention of being fair to her. That's why we talk about support women of color. That's why it's so important that if we got anybody through, that it was women of color. That's what we're talking about. That's what we're dealing with. And somebody's going to look at this and say, oh, identity politics. You're talking about identity politics. What do you think this is? This is identity politics. This is protecting white male Christian supremacy. This is identity politics. Miss me with that nonsense. I'm hot than a mud. Not only am I hot, but I'm like hot. Like it's a garage in Vegas. Lord Jesus. Somebody was barbecue, but seriously, like I understand it and I get it, and I applaud Rashida Tlaib right now. Like, hats off, standing O, the whole nine. Like, with what she's up against, and for her to fight as hard as she does every day to deal with this stuff, Ilhan Omar too, AOC, like, y'all need to stand behind these folks in the progressive movement. I understand you got your critiques of different things some of them might have done or might stand up for. I get it. I'm with you on that. But at the same time, dog, come on. Like, they're getting death threats every day. And these people in the FBI don't even bring these folks in. She talked about the one guy when she made the trip to Florida, they let him go on a tether. I'm sorry, that should be investigated. That's ridiculous. You let him go when she was going to be there. I ain't going to put two and two together, but you can put two and two together real easy and figure out what I'm thinking. Yeah, no, I'm not. It's just, it makes no sense. Well, no, it makes perfect sense. It makes perfect sense. And this is what we're talking about when we say we need to dismantle systems of oppression. It's not that man, Mr. McGarity, that was up there had a specific bias or was a racist. I'm not going to say none of that because that's a waste of my time. The issue is the system. The issue is the system that created this book that sat here and says nothing about nothing about white terrorism, which kills more people, which is what's shooting people every day. And let's keep it 100. It's a whites only sign on the Second Amendment. Black people get caught with a gun, a toy gun, they kill us. The only whites only sign still standing is on the Second Amendment, and they want to put one on the vote with voter suppression. But let's go through and look at some more pictures from this booklet. You mean to tell me that this right here, that's not a bias? You mean to tell me that this right here, that's not a bias? Why ain't Ben Shapiro picture up there? He inspired people to shoot people. Why ain't Candace Owens up there? She inspired people to shoot people. Why ain't Alex Jones' face up there? Nah, because you got an inherent bias, inherent institutional racism. This is what we're talking about. This is the training booklet for them to catch terrorists. This is the training book. So don't come to me with that nonsense and talk about some, well, it's inherent bias and this religion is violent. Like all religions are violent, dude. Go away. Go away. All of them are violent. Go away. It's nonsense. Y'all, America got serious problems with internal biases and racism and sexism and a million other isms that it got to work on. And this is just today's example.